Thank you everyone for attending GrowSafe's Accelerating Efficiency Together webinar series. I'm Danielle Starr. I am GrowSafe's Global Marketing Communications Manager. And with us today, we have Stephanie Nelson. She is the technical sales manager for GrowSafe. I knew I'd mess that up, Stephanie. And also with us today, we have Hal Nixdorff. He's from YV Ranch, just right outside of Calgary, Alberta. And together, they're going to be discussing the practical tips for running an efficiency trial. So we've taken you through this series and we're ending it today, really talking about managing your own trial and your operation. Just as we have been, we're going to have our live session be 20 minutes for presentation, and at the end we'll have about 10 minutes for questions. So you can see on your screen, there's that Q&A icon. Feel free throughout the presentation to submit your questions. We're going to do our best to get to questions at the end, but just as we have been doing, if we don't get to your questions, please feel free to submit them with your name, and then we'll continue to follow up after the presentation with your answers from either Stephanie or Hal, whoever you have them for. And then also throughout our presentation, we are going to have a polling question like we've done in our previous sessions. We really invite you to engage with us as we're going to share those live results with you throughout the session. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie and I'll let you get started, Stephanie.
Thanks, Danielle. Thank you everybody for joining today, whether you're here in the States with us or globally joining. We thank you all for tuning in with our webinar series. I've asked Hal Nixdorff of the YV Ranch to join with us today. Hal is a younger cattleman and producer just located north of Calgary, Alberta there at Airdrie, and also a GrowSafe customer that runs the system every day. So as we progress and move forward here, we presented a pretty good webinar series. However, we really haven't broke down the technology, how it works, planning trials, preparation for it. I've asked Hal to talk about his day-to-day activities and feed delivery. Prior to my GrowSafe career, I actually ran a system for ABS Global Powerline Genetics. So Hal and I can bring some real world experience with us here today. So as we join together here, really what's important is to talk about our 160 clients that we have globally, whether these are research clients, the systems being used in a academic university setting, or seed stock producers just kind of like Hal himself across 14 different countries here. So as we progress forward, we've talked about the feed intake nodes and the GrowSafe beef system. And a lot of us are probably fairly familiar with the GrowSafe or the feed intake technology, but maybe not so much on our in-pen weighing system called GrowSafe beef. So I'd like to take the opportunity today and break that apart. So with our feed intake nodes, the system basically works off of a half duplex EID. Each animal is tagged with that half duplex EID. When they stick their head through the vertical bars as shown here in the picture, the system reads that duplex ID, half duplex EID. The antenna here located at the edge of the bunk or in the lip of the bunk catches that read, and every time that animal visits, it's recording data on a every second or per second database. Each individual node will allow one animal to eat at one time and has a set of load bars located underneath each trough. All the data is compressed and is sent through our DAC panel to your dedicated computer there in your office. So as we progress forward and we talk about the GrowSafe beef or that in-pen weighing system that we have, very similar to how the schematics work with it. With the half duplex EID, each animal is tagged. They step up onto the scale collecting a partial body weight. It has load bars or load cells underneath here collecting that weight every time that animal comes to visit. And all that information is collected and sent from the DAC panel into the data hub located there in your office for your dedicated GrowSafe computer. Also a feature that the GrowSafe beef has that some may or may not know, we have the ability to mark or spray an animal, as you can see in the picture located up here. With the GrowSafe beef, we're continuously weighing animals every time they come to drink from the water. We're reducing those stress levels for our traditional shoot weights, and we're monitoring each individual animal on a day-to-day basis every time they come to drink water. So the GrowSafe platform, what is it? How does it work? And it collects information daily. whether it's the GrowSafe beef position or the feed intake node. Each individual piece of technology is gathering up to 432,000 samples per day, combining those samples and compressing them, sending them to the DAC panel located out there at the system in the field. From there, that DAC panel sends all of that information to the data hub, or for some of our 6,000 technology people, known as the master panel. The master panel is located there in your office, and all that data is compressed and uploaded to the GrowSafe cloud. Now, there's no need for Wi-Fi out at the DAC panel, just internet connection there in your office, so we're able to send that signal quite a ways. So with the GrowSafe protocols and standardization, a user cannot amend, adjust, alter any of the data that is collected. We can compare weights, whether it's the GrowSafe beef positions together from the scales or the feed intake node. Any unaccounted feed disappearance. All feed is assigned to an individual animal based off of their EID, and what goes into that bunk or that feed intake node is tallied and recorded. So we talk about all this and we go, wow, why so much data? Well, essentially, we've taken all the environmental factors that come together with having a system, whether it's rain, wind, snow, birds, pests, and we've taken this and tried to put it in a real world setting. And with GrowSafe, the data really drives very meaningful outcome. So no matter what kind of feed efficiency trial you may be running, standardization in all aspects of the trial management is critical when we're comparing cattle for benchmarking or improving your herd. So we've walked through the pin there. Essentially, we've looked at the technology. Now let's go ahead and set up for a trial. And I tell folks, don't be afraid of this at all. I mean, really, I like to compare it back to real world settings, whether it's an implement or we're agriculturally based and we're planting corn. You know, take all of this data that we have and don't be afraid of the technology at all. So we're working forward and we're going to put our testing groups together. So as we continue and work forward and plan for that, how many head are we wanting to put our stocking rate at? So let's take into consideration, what kind of trial are you running? Are you a research setting that you're going to be watching behavior or doing different feed comparison tests? Are you a seed stock producer? Are you testing 7 or 8 weight bulls or heifers, or are you testing yearling bulls? So how many times a day that you're going to feed those animals will matter. If you're feeding a silage-based ration that's very bulky, or if you're working with your local co-op and you're feeding more of a pelleted feed, your ration really kind of plays into the tie here on what kind of stocking rate. And traditionally, GrowSafe will put in forth that 8 to 10 head per node is usually what our stocking rate is, and moving forward. So as we work forward and we're working to plan for our trial, what data should we collect? What are we looking to do and bring forth? So as we work and we have our assigned groups together that we're going to have our test, all of our animals are tagged with a half duplex EID. We suggest that you never mix males or females together and have those test groups put together. If they're ranch cattle coming off of the ranch, they're already acclimated, they're used to being together. But if you're bringing different groups, ranch cattle in and different bulls, there's that commingling factor as well. So as we progress, we need to submit some data to GrowSafe. That would be just simple information of visual tags married with the EID, their date of birth and breed, origin, and if you wish to have GrowSafe calculate some efficiency EPDs to share that 3-generation pedigree. Moving forward, we need to complete a pretrial checklist. This is basically done to fire the system up and flip the breaker and make everything start working and collecting data. We've accounted for the number of head per trial. So say we have 4 intake nodes and we're putting 8 bulls to a node, that's 32 head that'll be in that pen. We've assigned a warm-up start date on when we're going to start acclimating those cattle. We'll have them in the pen and we'll work forward on that. We're going to set our start date for our trial, and when we think that it will be completed. We've cleaned around our system and we've done that housekeeping, prepping for the trial, and we've calibrated our scales and things are good to go. Some suggestions on setting up a trial. I suggest not setting it up on a weekend or ending it on a weekend, and plan for those dates that you can gather your crew together and say we need to collect shoot weights on these days. Danielle, I think we have a polling question here, don't we? The question that we've got here is, do cattle need a warm-up period before a trial starts? True or false?
Okay, we're going to take a couple more seconds and let people finish up voting. And we're going to end the poll.
Well, it looks like 98% of our folks, our viewers here, say that we do, and 2% don't. So at 2%, we listen up, because we've got some conversation for you here. Acclimation in a warm-up period is essential. I compare different things, whether you're signing up to run a marathon or any of those things. We can't just instantly say, today I'm going to run a marathon and not train for it. Just the same as if we're prepping hay equipment to get ready to go to the field. We're gonna check everything over, make sure there's oil in the gearboxes and everything's ready to go. Just very, very simple of a comparison to any piece of implement equipment that you have on your place. A warm-up period and acclimation is very, very essential. We ask folks to go ahead and acclimate those cattle for 10 to 14 days. And have those cattle commingled and ready to go. So we're not dealing with the pecking orders or commingling and whether you're putting a group of bulls together and such. And with that warm-up period, it ensures that the system is functioning, the tags are working, we're exclusively feeding in the feed intake nodes, and we're not feeding in those concrete bunks, and they're exclusively getting water from the GrowSafe beef there. We've completed our pretrial checklist. We've been in communication with our tech support representative, and things are off to a good start. So we talk about our tech support representatives, or our TSRs. We're good at acronyms there. A really very large benefit that really needs to be highlighted about GrowSafe is their tech support representatives. You're working with a live person that is, most of them are agriculturally based. They've either ran a system, they've operated a system, or maintained it. And those individuals are working weekly all the duration of your trial. They're checking your system daily during the weekdays there, making sure that everything is running and conditions are above ideal. And if there's any action items that need to be done, they're sending notification to the customer that says, hey, we need to go ahead and take action towards this. With each action item is a PDF with the step-by-step directions on how to troubleshoot that system. And if it comes to the point that you need one-on-one assistance, pick up the phone and call. They're available over the phone, email, or through trial notes. So as we move forward, we're prepping our system. We've got all of our data collected and submitted. We've done our pretrial checklist. Let's go ahead and do some housekeeping out there in the field. As you can see these pictures here, there's some feed built up around the outside of the node. In this picture on the left, there's some feed underneath it. Go ahead and pull the windscreens off, undo the pigtails, and pull those troughs out. Check the cabling, make sure everything's good to go. No different than an implement. We're checking hydraulic hoses and everything's ready to go before we start anything. Similar with the GrowSafe beef. Go grab that shovel out of the shed and go ahead and clean around this system, around the individual positions, as well as the manure and mud buildup there on top of the scale. Here's some pictures of some load bars. Make sure we've got all the feed cleaned off in between these load bars here, with the pictures in the middle and the far right. That will affect our weights throughout our trial. and make sure that the trough is sitting square on those load bars. So now I'd like Hal to go ahead and take forth here, discussing some of the day-to-day activities as well as feeding in the system. Please, Hal.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, I'll just take a second to talk a little bit about our operation and our system. So, as the girl said, I'm from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We have a seed stocker for cattle as well as run a commercial cow-calf operation. We've been testing for feed efficiency using the GrowSafe system for about 8 years now. Initially, we were testing at some local research stations. We were testing our sale bulls. And after those first few years of testing the bulls, we were running some of our own trials using those bulls on our commercial cows and doing some in-house research on our pasture stocking density and our feed to gains on our steers and the feedlot, and really impressed at how those feed efficient bulls would improve their offspring. And so that's why we took the jump forward to purchase our own feed intake system. So you can see this this picture here on the screen. That's at our place, and we have a 8-node system split into 2 pens, so we can test 2 groups of cattle at one time. We put all of our bulls through, and now we're testing out all of our replacement heifers and a couple rounds of custom cattle for local producers as well. So yeah, we can talk a little bit about my day-to-day feeding the systems and using the system. So if you can jump to the next slide there, Stephanie. So one of the most daunting things I thought when we first installed the system was feeding at it, because it's not just your standard J bunk or flat pad. We got this fancy technology. I was worried I might not be paying attention one day and run into it, or overfeed, underfeed, something like that. I didn't really know what I was doing when I got started, but once I got going, it was fairly straightforward. So the picture on the left of the feed truck, that might be your average feed truck, but the picture on the right, that's our feed wagon pulled by a tractor. So it's nothing special or fancy. And you see on the picture on the left, we see that cement curb right in front of the bunks there. That I believe they recommend that to be installed on all the feed intake systems. That's a pretty good piece of technology. So that sort of took all my worries away about running into the bunks. Your tire will rub up against that and avoid hitting them. But anyways, jump to the next slide here. So Stephanie had talked a bit about the warm-up period before the trial starts, and she talked about how you need to get the cattle accustomed to eating out of the bunks and make sure the system is working properly. So I also use that period as a time to get my feeding down pat. So in a typical feed bunk setting, you'd sort of start at one end and slowly drive along and release the feed throughout the whole pen. Whereas feeding on the GrowSafe bunks is slightly different. So you'll pull up to the first node, stop, feed at that node, then move to the next node and feed at that one, and so on. And when you start a trial, you might be running a different number of animals in the pen, or different size, or a different type of feed. And so I use those first 10 to 15 days to sort of get accustomed to how much the cattle are going to eat out of the bunks, and how much feed I'm going to feed in each one, and sort of what times of the day I'm going to feed, just to make sure I can keep feeding the bunks all day and keep the cattle eating and run along smoothly. So unlike a typical bunk system where you'd run a sort of a slick bunk management, our goal is to have feed in them constantly throughout the day. That way we can give equal time and equal chance for each individual animal to eat out of them. So when I run our bunk calls, I'll feed the GrowSafe bunks typically first thing in the morning, and before I feed them, I'll do a bunk call just to make sure there's a small amount of feed left in the bunks. And typically I will feed twice a day. On occasion, if we're running fewer animals or a more concentrated ration, I can feed once a day. And over those first 10 days, the first few days I get used to the ration, and then after that, the trial typically runs fairly smoothly on a feeding standpoint. You'll notice on these pictures here on the top right, that's a modification we did to our feed intake system. So those curved bars there in the center for the animal to put their head through. We test a lot of horned cattle, so we have large portion of our cattle are horned Herefords. So that's a small modification to allow the animals to get their heads, their horns through into the feed bunks easily. And the picture on the bottom right here, this is one day that I wasn't paying attention. I was on my cell phone and fed a bit too quick and had a bit of, I overfed a bit on the bunks, but wasn't too concerned about it. I just jumped out and moved that feed from those bunks into the next bunk, and it wasn't a big deal. But I work a lot with the tech support team too. They'll let me know if they think I need to feed a bit more, if the bunks aren't full enough throughout the day, or if I'm overfeeding and they're missing some of the EID reads on the animal. So it goes pretty smoothly. So we can move on here. So then, throughout the trial, when I'm feeding, typically, when I'm in the tractor feeding, I check a few things just to make sure that that we're collecting proper weights and EID reads. So you'll see in the picture on the left here, you're looking down the bunk line. Would be my typical view as I'm feeding. And I just look to make sure all those bunks are still sitting correctly on the load bars, and you can look down the bunk line, see that they're straight there. And these the center picture here is the spill guard. So that basically is when I feed it off to one edge or the other of the bunk, it doesn't fall between the bunks and get caught up. And I just look to make sure those are still sitting up properly and not rubbing on the bunk. And basically, just use common sense that, remember, we're trying to collect very accurate weights, and if something's laying on the bunks or rubbing, we won't be collecting the weights, but it's quite straightforward and very clear. So then, typically when I get to the ranch in the morning, I'll do a quick look at the GrowSafe computer, and so it's in our office here on site, and that's where all the data will come in from our system, and I'll check to see if the tech support has any updates for me from the previous day's data. So I'll check our DAC software, make sure it's up and running and none of the systems in error. And I'll check the action items. So this is where the tech support will leave any notes if they think that they have any questions about anything or think there may be an issue somewhere. That I check it on a daily basis, but not often is there any issues or any reasoning that I have to move forward. And then I'll also, check my email quick. If there's something fairly urgent from them, they'll typically email me. Then I also look more into the animal data side of things. So I check, I'll do a quick check to see if any animals are flagged for reduced weights. If any animals are not gaining along the average of the pen, or if they're starting to lose weight. And then one program that I really like is reduced daily intakes. So this will flag any animals that haven't eaten as much in the last few days or aren't eating at all. And I find this works really well with our health program. We can basically, I can always identify the sick animals, or if an animal has some issue, using that program prior to even walking through the pen and doing a visual assessment of the animals. Then I also just check to make sure that our data is coming in valid and that we are on track to finishing the trial with good amount of valid data days. And that's sort of my daily tasks when I'm using the GrowSafe system throughout a trial.
Thanks, Hal. So as Hal talked a little bit, as we're working through our schedule here, we've had our warm-up period, we've acclimated those cattle, systems running well. We've decided that we were either going to test for 49 days, putting GrowSafe beef and the feed intake technology together, or we're going to run a 70-day RFI trial with just the feed intake. So as we're rolling towards the end of our schedule here, we're communicating with our tech support representatives, making sure that we have enough valid days to end our trial and our trial duration is sufficient. What information will we have to conclude our trial with? Go ahead and you're collecting your ration sample and go ahead and send that to your TSR as well. And then any end of trial data, your off test weights or anything of that nature. So for those customers that are part of our network or our efficiency program, we're providing our partners with individual reports or a standardized report on all the individual animals. Some of the reports might include average daily gain, dry matter intake, RFI, and any EPDs if they elected to share a 3-generation pedigree with us. And these are standardized analytics reports and EPDs that are basically ready for our customers to use. So as we conclude our webinar here, really the message is when it comes to choosing a partner in efficiency, experience matters. GrowSafe's been around for 20 years. And as we work globally with 14 different countries, 160 total clients. We thank everybody for their time, but whether it's Hal or myself, we welcome any questions as we conclude our webinar here. And, we thank you for your time by all means.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Hal. Like Stephanie said, we're going to be taking questions now. We're going to dive right in. Stephanie, I'm going to start with you. If something goes wrong with a system and they need assistance, how might that person expect the notification?
Yeah, thank you. So that's really ties into our tech support representatives and our support team. They'll go ahead and they'll either send a notification. You can check your GrowSafe computer on your trial notes. They'll go ahead and they'll alert you with action items. And assigned with those action items is a PDF with step-by-step instructions on how to troubleshoot that system. Tied in with that, if you have to work on the system at all, GrowSafe provides a toolbox with all the tools that you need to go ahead and do some troubleshooting in that case, or if you need to change out any RTUs or load bars or anything of that nature, everything that you need is in that toolbox provided by GrowSafe. Say the situation comes to the point where you just need some one-on-one commentary and assistance with your tech support. If it's during the week and during business hours, pick up the phone and call them. We have a toll-free support line that can help you out with our customer service.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. Another follow-up question for you. Now, do you have any suggestions for maybe some weekly maintenance for your system, for maybe say feed buildup, or what tools do you use for that instance?
Yeah, just like some of those pictures that we've seen with the load bars there, I just tie it back to about any implement that you've got on your place. Whether we're prepping for hay season or we're finishing up some spring planting, we're always prepping equipment and getting things ready to go. We're not going to head straight to the field and not have anything ready to go. There's just always that regular maintenance. And, with the GrowSafe system comes some regular maintenance, and housekeeping is essential. Whether a deal that I used to use was a leaf blower, or if I had an air compressor there at the feed yard on the back of the pickup, that I would just take the wand or the leaf blower and blow everything out around that system. There's a nice day or a Friday afternoon, go ahead and scrape around that system and clean it out. If you do take any of the feed intake nodes out, go ahead and make sure you've got everything put back into place, and then take your beep wand and go through each individual node to make sure that the pigtails connected there, so you don't lose any data over the weekend, trying to be proactive to get ahead and clean, and then the system didn't get plugged in. So
certainly, thank you. And before I flip over for a couple of questions for Hal, Stephanie, if I can we had a chat come in. Can you repeat what you mentioned about the GrowSafe beef, about the painting of animals, and how we would go about and why we'd be painting animals? Someone just missed that earlier in your presentation. So if you could just touch on that quickly again.
Yeah. You know, our GrowSafe beef system is located there alongside the automatic water, and it's an attractant for that animal to come up. So with that, we've got the ability as that animal's front portion of the body is standing on that scale, and the way that the GrowSafe beef is designed, the top of that essential cage will come back to the shoulder blades or the front shoulder blades of that animal, allowing us to spray that animal. So some uses that you might use that for, like in-house regular treatment there at the YV ranch. If he's got an animal that's got reduced intakes and he wants to mark that animal, he can allow the system, or he can go to his GrowSafe designated computer there and tell the system when that animal comes up to water the next time, go ahead and mark it. Another situation might be in a feed yard setting that we have with our beef marketing program that allows feed yards to go ahead and mark those animals, whether there's a reduced intake or losing weight. And then that's an easy tool for the cowboys or pin riders to go ahead and pull those cattle in the pins.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie, for clarifying. Hal, I'm going to switch over to you now. On the management side, can you talk to us about why it's beneficial for the cattle to eat the feed down in each bunk, and why not always have the feed topped off and full with feed?
Yeah, all right, Danielle. So the biggest thing I see on the feed management side, as I discussed, I think it's always very good to have feed in the bunk so animals can eat it any time of the day. However, the big thing is, you want to keep that feed fresh and don't allow it to go stale or rotten in the bottom of the bunks. So if you always have the bunks full, there'll be that feed at the bottom that goes old. So, I guess the key is to time it so that, basically when you go to feed in the morning, those animals are eating the last of the feed out of the bottom of the bunk. So that way they're getting all fresh feed in the bunks and always have high quality feed in front of them.
That's great. Thanks, Hal. Another question for you. What is the typical age you start trying out the animals on the system?
Yeah, so we run cattle at a few different ages. Our first group of bulls we'll put in just after weaning.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be, by the time they get in the pen, about 7 months of age. And then some of the older cattle we test, we'll test all the way up to a year and a half of age. The biggest thing is, we're just trying to manage our system most efficiently as we can, and have work cattle around to fit in the groups and keep proper contemporary groups with them. So it seems to me that you can be fairly flexible on the age that you test them at.
Certainly, thank you. And then how often do you typically communicate with the GrowSafe tech support?
Yeah, so when I start the trial, we typically send a few emails back and forth just to make sure everything's up and running properly, and we're good to go. I let them know the sex and breed and types of animals we're going to test, and then throughout the trial, if they see any issues or I have any questions about how the trial is going, typically I'll throw them an email, or if something's urgent, usually I just call them up, and it seems like they're always pretty good to get back to me right away and answer the phone. So that maybe happened once or twice throughout the trial, probably. And then when the trial is over with, then we move on to the next trial and do it again.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Hal. I know it takes a lot of commitment from your side as well, being responsible to the tech service team. So I think it's a great partnership that you have. Well, wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for submitting questions. Like I said, please continue to ask questions by submitting them to info@growsafe.com. And any questions that we didn't get to here today, we will get to after the webinar, either from Hal or Stephanie, and we'll send you responses within the week. And thank you for continuing to join us for the past 5 weeks. All webinars are going to be available on our website within the next couple of weeks. So if you missed any of our previous webinars but were able to join today, you'll be able to catch up and see all of our previous webinars that we've had over this past month. So thank you, everyone, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your week.